Hello, my name is Dekel. I'm a senior security researcher at Zero Networks, and today I'll present our open source tool LDAP Firewall. You can find me on Twitter at Dekel_Paz or on LinkedIn as DekelPaz, no underscore. For our agenda, I'll first discuss what is LDAP and why it matters from a security standpoint. Then I'll talk about our tool LDAP Firewall, how it works and how to use it. Finally, I'll demonstrate the tool in the context of the DEATHCon lab. LDAP is a protocol used for accessing directory information, mostly known in Windows for interacting with the Active Directory schema. With LDAP, you can query the domain controllers for information such as users, groups, and permissions. As such queries happen behind the scene all the time, the LDAP ports must be open and accessible on the DCs from the entire domain. Besides the many legitimate uses of LDAP, the protocol is also used by attackers in different ways. Bloodhound uses LDAP to query information about permissions in order to generate its attack paths. The SAM account name spoofing attack relies on a vulnerability that lets you add unauthorized computers using LDAP. Attackers also modify and delete Active Directory objects to gain privilege escalation. The main issue with LDAP on Windows is that there is no easy way to audit or control it. Only limited logs are available, and you are forced to leave the entire protocol open. LDAP Firewall was created to let you take control over your LDAP servers. It is an open source tool for Windows that enables admins to configure rules for limiting access to the Active Directory schema and auditing incoming LDAP requests. Each rule may define whether to allow or block a request based on a set of criteria. So, for example, you can decide that only specific source IPs may perform ad operations. The tool works by injecting the LDAP Firewall DLL to the LSAS process on the domain controllers. Once loaded, the DLL hooks the relevant functions into NT-DSAI DLL, which is the model that handles LDAP requests on Windows servers. When an incoming LDAP request arrives, LDAP Firewall passes the information and determines whether to pass it on or drop it based on the configured rules. To get started with LDAP Firewall, you can check out our Git repository at github.com/zeronetworks/LDAP Firewall. On the release page, you can find the latest binary build available for download. The main files of interest are the LDAP Firewall Manager, which lets you manage the tool, and the config.json file, which is used to configure the firewall rules. Using a command prompt, execute the LDAP Firewall Manager with the /status flag to make sure all prerequisites are met, and that the firewall is ready to be installed. To install LDAP Firewall, just use the /install flag. Once the install is finished, a new application log source will be available in the event viewer. Here you can find logs for incoming LDAP operations based on your configured rules. For example, we can see here an add operation. And here is a modify operation. And another add operation. By modifying the rules.json file, you can configure your own rules for LDAP Firewall. Rules can be configured to block or allow operations based on a set of parameters and whether to audit the requests. In the default configuration, we first have an audit-only rule that enables logging of search operations for suspicious attributes. After that, we have a rule that disables auditing of other search requests, as they can get quite noisy. Lastly, we have a rule that enables and logs all LDAP operations. Using this config, it is possible to limit LDAP operations for specific hosts or users. LDAP Firewall is installed in audit mode on the DEATHCon lab domain controllers. You can view the logs on Microsoft Sentinel using the LDAP Firewall events log function. Several queries are available for the detection of common LDAP attacks, such as for the Bloodhound collector and SAM account name spoofing attacks. These detections have also been submitted to the Sigma repository and will soon be available as Sigma rules. In the Functions section, the raw events can be viewed by running the LDAP Firewall events function. These events include the operation type, source IP and user, whether the request was allowed or blocked, and the operation data. In the Queries section, you can find a few pre-configured detections for LDAP-based attacks. For example, the Bloodhound Collector query detects the LDAP operations performed by the tool. The query takes the results from the LDAP Firewall events function and then filters out search operations that request attributes such as admin count, user password, and allowed to delegate. Search requests for these specific attributes are uncommon and are indicative of a Bloodhound Collector execution. Here, we have an example of detecting the SAM account name spoofing attack. First, I run several queries to generate a new computer object and rename it to not contain a trailing $sign. We can now go to Microsoft Sentinel and load the LDAP Firewall computer name impersonation query. This query looks for modify operations of the SAM account name attribute that do not contain a trailing $sign. We can see a detection in the results for my spoofing attack. Finally, let's see how we can use LDAP Firewall to block attacks instead of just detecting them. To demonstrate, I'll run Sharphound, the Bloodhound Collector, on a lab computer, which works correctly. On my lab DC server, I make sure the LDAP Firewall is installed using the status flag, and then I open the config file. In order to block suspicious search operations, I just need to add a new field for my first rule and set the action to block. To reload the configuration, I run the LDAP Firewall Manager with the /update flag. Going back to my attacker machine, I first need to delete my Bloodhound cache. Now, when I run Sharphound, we can see that it is unable to fetch objects from my Active Directory. Here are some ways to get hands-on experience with LDAP Firewall. 1. Generate a LDAP search and find all human users, excluding service accounts. On Windows, the ldp.exec tool can be used to perform LDAP queries. 2. Create a query in Sentinel to detect potentially harmful LDAP operations originating from non-DC servers. This could be requests such as modify and delete. 3. In your own lab, install LDAP Firewall on the domain controller and set up a rule to block ad operations from unauthorized sources. Thanks for watching my presentation on LDAP Firewall. I would love to get your feedback or hear how you use LDAP Firewall for defense or research purposes. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions over the DEATHCon Slack channel or via the various online social platforms.